For decades, the world of Hollywood has been captivated by the silence between two of its most iconic stars, James Garner and Charles Bronson. These two actors were not only famous for their roles on screen but also for the mysterious gap in their public relationship. Despite working together on several films, they rarely spoke about each other in public. Fans and journalists have speculated for years about what caused this silence, with many wondering if it was personal, professional, or something far deeper. James Garner was known for his warmth and openness, yet he never fully addressed the connection with Charles Bronson. This left a trail of curiosity that seemed to grow with every year that passed. People wanted to know what was the real story behind the two actors. Why did Garner in particular refuse to speak about Bronson when everyone else seemed eager to share their opinions? This question lingered in the minds of fans and industry insiders alike. On one hand, they were two of the most recognized faces in Hollywood during the 1960s and 1970s, both often cast as tough, no-nonsense characters. On the other hand, their personal lives and interactions seemed to be kept strictly private. Were there disagreements, or was it something that simply wasn't discussed? The mystery surrounding their relationship only grew as time went on. James Garner had a long and successful career, making a name for himself with roles in beloved shows like Maverick and The Rockford Files. He had an ability to make people feel comfortable and connected to him, whether through the screen or in real life. Despite this, there was always a sense of distance when it came to his relationship with Charles Bronson. The two men had worked together on films like The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven, but rarely if ever did they share details about their time together. Instead, other stars, directors, and crew members spoke about the dynamics of these projects, but neither Bronson nor Garner seemed to reveal much about their time spent on set. Why did James Garner choose to keep quiet about Charles Bronson for so long? The curiosity surrounding this question was not only about the nature of their personal relationship but also about what was going on in Hollywood at the time. Both men were rising stars in an industry that was at the time undergoing significant changes. The studios were becoming more focused on larger-than-life personalities, and actors were beginning to have more control over their careers. With the pressures of fame, the demands of their roles, and the competition in Hollywood, it's no surprise that personal relationships among stars could be complicated. For many years, this question went unanswered. James Garner continued to be open about other aspects of his life, his friendships, and his career. He shared stories about his childhood, his time in the military, and his personal experiences working on set. Yet when it came to Charles Bronson, he remained tight-lipped. Why was that? What could possibly have happened that made such an important part of his life off-limits to the public? In interviews, Garner would speak fondly of many of his co-stars, but Bronson was almost always left out of the conversation. This silence only made fans more eager to know what had transpired between the two men. Was it a clash of personalities, or was there a deeper hidden reason for their lack of interaction? It was an intriguing puzzle that many tried to solve. At the same time, Charles Bronson, known for his roles in tough, gritty films like Death Wish, rarely spoke about Garner either. It wasn't that Bronson was known for being silent, he was just known for being reserved and private. The two had similar temperaments, both known for their quiet intensity on screen, but that didn't explain everything. The silence between them continued to spark curiosity, and fans began to wonder if the answer lay beyond the surface. Now, after all these years, James Garner has finally decided to break his silence. He shared details of his relationship with Charles Bronson, revealing some surprising and unexpected truths about the interactions. But what exactly did he say? And why, after all this time, did he choose to speak out? Garner's decision to finally share his thoughts has left fans and critics alike in a state of eager anticipation. What was it that made him stay silent for so long? Was there something that had kept him from revealing the truth, or was it simply a matter of timing? Whatever the reason, his choice to speak now has added a new layer to the story of these two legendary actors. What makes this revelation even more fascinating is the fact that Garner and Bronson were not just co-stars, they were part of a larger Hollywood landscape that was shifting rapidly. The 1960s and 1970s were a time of change in the entertainment industry, with new types of films being made and actors becoming more than just stars, they were becoming icons. During this time, relationships between co-stars, directors, and producers were sometimes more fragile than they appeared. The pressures of fame, the long hours on set, and the highly competitive nature of Hollywood made it easy for even the closest of friendships to fray. For James Garner, the decision to open up about Charles Bronson represents not just a personal choice but also a reflection of the changes in Hollywood itself. As the industry has evolved, so have the ways in which actors share their stories. Garner's story is no longer one of silence and mystery. Instead, it's one of truth and transparency, a willingness to share his experiences with a public that has long been curious about the details of his life. This breaking of silence isn't just about one man's relationship with another actor. It's about how the stories of Hollywood's biggest stars have often been kept behind closed doors. For years, fans were left to imagine what might have happened between two of their favorite actors. Now, with James Garner speaking out, the curtain is pulled back just a little bit, offering a glimpse into a past that had remained hidden for far too long. And while the full details are still unfolding, one thing is clear: this is a moment in Hollywood history that will change the way fans view the relationship between James Garner and Charles Bronson. As the story continues to evolve, the world will finally learn the truth about why these two legends kept their silence for so long, and what really happened behind the scenes. James Garner was known for his charm and openness. He had a way of connecting with people that made them feel comfortable, as if they were talking to a friend rather than a famous actor. Whether he was acting on screen or sitting down for an interview, his easygoing nature made him a beloved figure. His career spanned many decades, and his roles ranged from playful and witty characters to more serious and dramatic parts. However, despite his generally open and approachable personality, there was one part of his life he never spoke about for many years: his relationship with Charles Bronson. The two actors, both known for their roles in action-packed films, worked together on a few occasions, but their time on set and their off-screen interactions were always left unexplored. For years, fans and reporters noticed that when asked about Bronson, James Garner would remain unusually quiet or change the subject. Even when asked directly, he would provide vague answers or avoid talking about the subject entirely. This left many people wondering what was really going on between the two of them. Was there something personal that had caused this silence, or was it a professional matter that needed to be kept under wraps? Why did Garner, who was so open about many aspects of his life, choose to keep this particular chapter hidden? It was a question that many had asked for years, and it sparked curiosity among fans, reporters, and even other actors. The mystery surrounding their relationship only seemed to deepen with time. James Garner, who had always been willing to share his experiences with others, appeared to have drawn a line when it came to discussing Charles Bronson. Was there some sort of unspoken agreement between the two stars to keep their relationship private, or was there a deeper reason for the silence? Garner had worked with many people in Hollywood, but he was known for maintaining friendships and relationships that lasted for years. He spoke openly about his co-stars, his directors, and even his time in the military. But when it came to Charles Bronson, there was always an air of mystery. Even though both men were successful in their own right, with careers that were intertwined by the projects they worked on, they never seemed to be close. This raised questions: did they not get along? Were they simply two men who worked together but didn't form a personal connection? Or was there something more to their relationship that James Garner wasn't ready to talk about? For many years, the public was left with no answers, and the silence only fueled the curiosity. James Garner was seen as an open book by many, a man who had nothing to hide. So why was this part of his life kept under wraps? Fans would speculate that maybe there had been a falling out between the two men. Perhaps there had been disagreements or even conflicts on set that had caused them to keep their distance. Or maybe the truth was far less dramatic, with their relationship simply being one of professional respect, with no deep personal connection. As the years went by, the mystery surrounding James Garner and Charles Bronson only grew. The question was raised time and time again, but still no answers came. This only made people more intrigued. Hollywood was known for its glitz and glamour, but it also had a history of hidden stories, behind-the-scenes tensions, and untold truths. It wasn't uncommon for actors to keep their personal lives private, especially when it came to their relationships with other stars. But James Garner was different. He had never been one to shy away from speaking about his experiences and the people he had worked with. Why then was he silent about Bronson? Fans who admired both actors were left wondering whether they had missed something. Had they not seen the signs of a deeper connection? Was there a bond between them that was simply not visible to the public? Or was it possible that there had been a rift, something so significant that it had led both actors to avoid discussing it? The mystery grew even more compelling when one considered the nature of both men's careers. James Garner and Charles Bronson were both known for playing tough, gritty characters, often finding themselves in roles where they had to face intense challenges or physical danger. Their on-screen personas were larger than life, and they both had a reputation for being strong and independent. It seemed almost impossible to imagine either of them letting their guard down, especially in an industry as competitive as Hollywood. But this only added to the curiosity. How could two men who seemed so similar in many ways not have a deeper relationship, whether as friends or colleagues? Even more intriguing was the fact that Charles Bronson, known for being more reserved and private, never spoke about James Garner either. Bronson was famous for his quiet demeanor and his reluctance to share personal details with the public. He didn't often open up about his co-stars or his personal life, so his silence on the matter was not entirely surprising. However, when paired with Garner's own reticence, it only added fuel to the fire. What had happened between them that made both men stay quiet for so long? The questions remained unanswered for a long time. The media tried to dig deeper, but there was no concrete information. Fans continued to speculate, and the mystery surrounding their relationship became a kind of unsolved puzzle in Hollywood history. Despite all the speculation, the truth about James Garner and Charles Bronson's relationship remained one of the entertainment industry's most intriguing, unanswered questions. Now, after so many years, James Garner has finally decided to speak up about his relationship with Charles Bronson. What made him change his mind? Was it the passing of time, or had he simply decided that the truth was no longer something he needed to hide? Whatever the reason, the fact that he is finally opening up about the situation has caused excitement among fans and critics alike. What will he reveal? Will the truth be more surprising than anyone could have imagined? In sharing his story, Garner has taken a step toward clearing up the mystery that has lingered for decades. The silence has been broken, and now for the first time fans will get to hear the truth from one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. What this truth will be remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: after all these years, the mystery surrounding James Garner and Charles Bronson is finally about to be solved. And as the story unfolds, fans can't help but wonder what was really going on between these two iconic actors all along. James Garner and Charles Bronson were two stars that seemed to be cut from the same cloth in Hollywood. Both men built their careers playing strong, tough characters, often in roles that showcased their grit and determination. They were part of the same Hollywood machine, yet their off-screen relationship remained shrouded in mystery for decades. They had worked together on a number of films, including The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven, yet little was known about their personal interactions. To many, it seemed like they were just two men who shared the same workspace but didn't have much else in common. But was that really the case? Did they share more than just their professional connection? And if so, why had they kept their relationship so private for so long? It wasn't uncommon for actors to keep things professional on set and away from the media. Hollywood has always been a place where public personas and private lives are kept separate. Yet the silence between James Garner and Charles Bronson felt different. Fans, critics, and even those who worked with them had always felt that there was more to the story than met the eye. For years, the industry had accepted the fact that these two men simply didn't share much about each other. But as the years went by, the curiosity grew stronger. The question on everyone's mind was, why did they never seem to talk about each other, even when their careers were so intertwined? James Garner, known for his charismatic presence on and off screen, rarely spoke about his personal life. He had a reputation for being open and approachable, yet this one aspect of his life remained a mystery. When asked about his time with Charles Bronson, he would typically sidestep the question or offer only brief, vague responses. It was as if there was an unspoken rule that this particular topic was off limits. But why? What could have happened between the two of them that made it so difficult to discuss? The silence spoke volumes to those who paid attention, but no one knew for sure what had led to it. In contrast, Charles Bronson was known for being a private person. He rarely shared details about his life, and his demeanor off-screen was as tough and quiet as the characters he portrayed in his films. Bronson's reserved nature had earned him a certain mystique, and he didn't seem to want to share much about his relationships with other stars. It was clear that he didn't have the same inclination to discuss his co-stars as many others did. However, his silence on the matter of James Garner was particularly telling. Given that they had shared screen time and worked closely on set, why was Bronson so quiet about their relationship? The lack of public information about their interactions only deepened the curiosity. People started to speculate. Some believed that there had been a personal issue between the two men. Maybe something had happened on set that created tension between them. Others thought that it might have been more of a professional distance. Perhaps they simply didn't connect on a personal level and chose to keep things strictly business. But the truth remained elusive. What was most intriguing, however, was the fact that both men were incredibly successful in their. James Garner was a household name, known for his roles in The Rockford Files and Maverick. He had a reputation for being charming and approachable, always able to make his audience feel like they knew him. Bronson, on the other hand, was known for his intense and stoic characters, particularly in films like Death Wish. Both men were icons in their own right, yet there was a noticeable absence of a deep personal connection between them. If they had worked together so closely, why didn't they speak more about their experiences? What had really happened behind the scenes? As time went on, it became clear that there was more to their relationship than anyone had realized. James Garner, who had always been open about his other co-stars, began to reflect on his past experiences in Hollywood. He started to realize that despite the silence, there was something valuable to be shared about his relationship with Bronson. The industry had changed so much over the years, and with that change came a greater willingness to open up about past experiences. For Garner, sharing his side of the story seemed to be a way to clear the air and provide insight into a part of his life that had remained hidden for so long. The fact that these two actors, so closely tied in Hollywood's history, had never openly discussed their time together was puzzling. Hollywood is a place where stories are shared, where co-stars become friends, and where actors often reflect on their working relationships. Yet, in the case of James Garner and Charles Bronson, their silence had only added to the mystery. What made their bond so unique that it had to be kept behind closed doors for so many years? Finally, as Garner began to speak more openly, the truth started to emerge. He explained that his relationship with Bronson had always been one of mutual respect, but there had never been a deep personal connection. They were both professional actors who were focused on their career, and their interactions were always grounded in the work they were doing together. Garner admitted that while he respected Bronson's abilities as an actor, they didn't spend much time together outside of their work. It wasn't that there was animosity between them, it was simply that they didn't form the close friendship that people might have expected. This revelation was eye-opening for many fans who had long wondered about the nature of their relationship. It wasn't a dramatic falling out or a hidden feud, it was simply a case of two men who worked together but never developed a deeper bond. Their connection was one of professionalism, not friendship. This was a refreshing take on what many had assumed was a more complicated story. It was a reminder that not all Hollywood relationships are filled with drama and conflict. Sometimes two stars can share the same stage without forming a lifelong friendship. What made this revelation even more significant was the fact that James Garner had never publicly stated this before. For years, the silence had only added to the mystery, but now the truth was out. Fans could now understand that the lack of interaction between Garner and Bronson wasn't due to a hidden feud, it was simply the way things were between them. This was a moment of clarity that helped fans see these two iconic actors in a new light. James Garner's decision to speak openly about his relationship with Charles Bronson was a significant moment in Hollywood history. It was a reminder that even the most famous stars have private lives that they choose not to share. It was also a chance for fans to better understand the dynamics between two men who, despite working together, never became the close friends that many had expected. Their story is a testament to the complexity of human relationships and the way in which people, even in the spotlight, can choose to keep certain aspects of their lives private. For many years, James Garner's relationship with Charles Bronson remained one of Hollywood's great unsolved mysteries. Fans and reporters would ask questions, but no one could get a straight answer. Both of these iconic actors, known for their tough and action-packed roles, had something in common: they were both legends in the film industry. Yet, their off-screen relationship was never discussed, and that lack of information only made the public more curious. Why were these two actors who had shared the same stages and sets never seen together outside of their work? What was it that made their relationship so private, almost hidden from the world? For years, people speculated, but nobody could ever get a definitive answer. But now, after decades of silence, James Garner was finally speaking out, and the public was eager to learn what he had to say. Garner, known for his charm, wit, and open personality, had never been shy about discussing his career or the people he had worked with. He had always been willing to share stories from his personal life, his military service, and his time in Hollywood. So why had he remained silent about Charles Bronson for so long? The public was dying to know. Some believed that there was a personal issue between the two actors, while others wondered if it was simply a case of two professionals who didn't have much to say to each other. Regardless of the reason, the curiosity surrounding their relationship was undeniable. It was as if there was a puzzle piece missing in the story of these two Hollywood giants, and people were desperate to fit it into place. What made this situation even more intriguing was the fact that James Garner and Charles Bronson had worked together on several high-profile films. These movies weren't just any films, they were part of the golden age of Hollywood, the kind of productions that defined an era. But despite their shared success, there had been little to no personal interaction between them. Garner had starred in popular television shows and films, becoming a household name with roles that made him a beloved figure. Bronson, too, had achieved a similar level of fame with his iconic roles in films like Death Wish. Both men had a reputation for being tough on screen, but behind the scenes it seemed as though they were two entirely different people. There was no indication that they had much in common outside of their work, and that was what puzzled everyone. As James Garner started to speak more openly, it became clear that their relationship had been much more professional than anyone had realized. He admitted that while he had great respect for Bronson's acting abilities, they had never really formed a close bond. This was surprising to many fans who had assumed that after working together on such major projects they would have developed a friendship. But that wasn't the case. Garner explained that in Hollywood it was common for actors to work with people for years without necessarily becoming close friends. They would share moments on set, but once the cameras stopped rolling, they would often go their separate ways. It wasn't that there was any bad blood between them, it was simply that they were two people who shared the same job but didn't need to have a personal relationship outside of it. This revelation was a shock to many, but it also made sense. Hollywood is a place where people are often expected to perform on screen, but their personal lives are rarely part of the story. Actors have long been known for keeping their personal and professional worlds separate, and the idea that two co-stars could simply have a professional relationship wasn't as surprising as it first seemed. But the fact that James Garner, who had always been open about his life, chose to keep his relationship with Charles Bronson private for so many years raised more questions. Why was it that despite everything he had shared with the public, this one aspect of his life remained hidden? In many ways, their story was a reflection of the larger dynamics of Hollywood during their time. The film industry, especially in the mid-20th century, was a place where personal connections often took a backseat to professional obligations. Actors, even those who had worked together for years, often didn't form deep friendships. The industry was so demanding that people would focus primarily on their work, sometimes leaving little room for personal bonds. It was a world where appearances mattered, but the reality was often different. And for James Garner and Charles Bronson, their relationship was simply one of mutual respect without any deeper emotional connection. As James Garner spoke more about the situation, the public started to understand that his silence wasn't a sign of conflict, it was just how things were between him and Bronson. There had been no dramatic fallout or hidden animosity. Instead, their relationship was built on the understanding that they were colleagues in a highly competitive industry. They worked together, but they didn't need to be friends. That's not to say that there wasn't any respect or admiration between them. It was clear that James Garner had a deep respect for Bronson's talent as an actor, just as Bronson appreciated Garner's skills in front of the camera. But that respect didn't translate into a close personal relationship. What made this revelation even more interesting was the fact that James Garner had never spoken about it before. For years, the silence had been part of the mystery, and now that he was opening up, people were eager to hear his side of the story. Garner explained that he had always been focused on his own career and had never felt the need to explain his relationship with Bronson. It wasn't something he had hidden, it was simply a part of his life that hadn't been a priority to discuss. In the end, the story of James Garner and Charles Bronson is not one of drama or conflict, but of two professionals who respected each other's work but didn't form a personal bond. For fans who had been hoping for some hidden story behind their relationship, this may have been a disappointment. But for many, it was a reminder that Hollywood isn't always filled with personal drama. Sometimes two stars simply do their jobs, share a few moments on set, and then go their separate ways. James Garner's decision to speak openly about his relationship with Charles Bronson has finally shed light on a mystery that had persisted for decades. It wasn't a story filled with tension or drama, it was simply a story of two men who worked together but never became the close friends people may have hoped for. And in the end, that's okay. Hollywood is a world full of complex stories, but not every story has to be filled with secrets or hidden truths. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. And for James Garner, it was simply a matter of mutual respect without the need for a deep personal connection. For years, people wondered why James Garner never spoke more about his relationship with Charles Bronson. They had worked together in some of the most iconic movies of their time, yet there was little to no public discussion between them. It left fans and critics curious, wondering if something had happened between the two actors that made them keep their distance. It wasn't that they didn't respect each other, in fact, both men were known for their professionalism on set. But why, after all those years in Hollywood, did they never form a strong personal connection? What could have possibly kept them from becoming friends like so many other co-stars? This silence was a puzzle, and for decades, no one had the pieces to solve it. But as time passed, James Garner started to open up, offering a rare glimpse into a part of his life that had remained quiet for so long. And with that, the mystery began to unravel. James Garner had always been the kind of actor who was willing to talk about his life and experiences. He wasn't afraid to share personal stories, and his reputation as a charming, down-to-earth man made him beloved by fans. But when it came to Charles Bronson, Garner had always been tight-lipped. For years, he avoided discussing their time together, even though they had worked on major films and shared some significant moments in Hollywood. Fans started to question whether there was more to the story than what they were seeing. Was there some kind of hidden rivalry between them? Or was it simply a case of two actors who didn't have much in common? No one knew for sure, and the silence only fueled the curiosity. What made their relationship so intriguing was the fact that both James Garner and Charles Bronson were larger-than-life figures in Hollywood. They had carved out their own unique places in the industry, and their careers were marked by a string of successful roles. James Garner had found fame with TV shows like Maverick and The Rockford Files, while Charles Bronson had become a Hollywood legend thanks to his roles in films like Death Wish. Despite their success, there had never been any indication that they were close. Fans couldn't help but wonder why. Was it just a matter of different personalities, or was there something more that they had never shared with the world? As James Garner started to reflect on his past, he realized that his relationship with Charles Bronson wasn't as mysterious as everyone had made it out to be. Garner admitted that in Hollywood, it wasn't uncommon for actors to work closely together without forming a strong personal bond. He explained that while they had great respect for each other as professionals, they had never been close friends. It was as simple as that. They shared a mutual admiration for each other's work, but their personal lives never overlapped in a way that led to a deep friendship. For Garner, this wasn't something he had ever felt the need to explain. It was just the way things were. But when he started to think about it, he realized that their story was one worth sharing. What was especially interesting about this revelation was that James Garner had never really discussed it before. For years, fans had wondered if there was some sort of hidden tension between the two men, but Garner had never spoken about it publicly. In fact, he had always avoided the topic altogether. So when he finally opened up about it, it came as a surprise to many. It was almost as if he was lifting the veil on a part of his life that had remained shrouded in mystery for so long. And in doing so, he helped to clear up a question that had been on everyone's mind for decades. Why didn't James Garner and Charles Bronson ever form a close friendship? For James Garner, it wasn't a story of rivalry or conflict, it was simply a matter of two men who worked together but didn't need to be friends. This wasn't unusual in Hollywood, where many actors come and go, working on projects without forming deep personal bonds. Hollywood, after all, is a place where business often comes before personal connections. People may share screen time and build relationships on set, but once the cameras stop rolling, it's not always the case that those connections continue in real life. For Garner and Bronson, their professional paths simply didn't intersect in a way that would lead to a lasting friendship. What made this story even more compelling was the fact that James Garner had always been willing to talk about his relationships with other co-stars. He was known for his warm personality and his ability to connect with people. Yet, when it came to Charles Bronson, he had always kept a distance. Why? For years, fans had speculated about the reasons behind this. Some believed it was because of differing personalities. Perhaps Bronson's stoic, reserved nature didn't mesh with Garner's more outgoing, charming persona. Others wondered if there had been a falling out between the two men. But the truth was simpler than anyone could have imagined. They just weren't close, and that was okay. James Garner's openness about this part of his life was refreshing. It allowed fans to see that not every Hollywood relationship is filled with drama or intrigue. Sometimes two people can work together for years without forming a deep friendship, and that's perfectly normal. It wasn't a sign of animosity, it was simply the reality of their professional lives. And that was something that Garner had come to accept. By sharing this, he helped fans understand that there didn't always have to be a hidden story behind every relationship. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. What made this even more interesting was the fact that Hollywood, for all its glitz and glamour, is often a place of isolation for its stars. Many actors work long hours, traveling from one set to the next, without ever truly connecting with the people they work with. They might share a moment on screen, but when the cameras stop rolling, they often go their separate ways. This was the case with James Garner and Charles Bronson. Their careers were successful, but their personal lives remained separate. They weren't best friends, but they were colleagues who had a mutual respect for each other's work. By opening up about his relationship with Charles Bronson, James Garner gave fans a rare glimpse into the truth behind their dynamic. It wasn't a story of conflict or unspoken tension, it was simply a story of two actors who worked together and had a professional relationship. They respected each other, but they didn't feel the need to share more than that. For fans who had been hoping for a deeper, more dramatic story, this was a revelation. It was a reminder that Hollywood relationships are often more complicated than they seem, and sometimes, the simplest explanation is the one that rings true. James Garner's decision to speak out finally put to rest the rumors and speculation that had surrounded his relationship with Charles Bronson for so many years. It wasn't a dramatic story of feuds or friendship, it was just the story of two men who worked together but never formed a lasting bond. And that in its own way was a story worth telling. James Garner had always been known for his openness and candid nature. He never hesitated to share details about his career, his personal life, or his experiences in Hollywood. But when it came to Charles Bronson, things were different. For years, the public was left wondering why Garner kept quiet about their relationship. Both men were Hollywood icons, both had starred in films that defined the action genre, yet there was very little known about their personal connection. It was as though there was a hidden story, something people were dying to hear, but for some reason, Garner had never shared. The curiosity surrounding this mysterious aspect of his life grew over the years. Why was James Garner so tight-lipped about Bronson? Why had he never spoken about their time working together? It seemed like there was a part of the Hollywood story that had never been fully told. People began to speculate. Some believed there had been a fallout between the two actors. Perhaps something had happened on set that caused a rift. Others thought it was simply a matter of personality differences. Garner, known for his approachable and friendly demeanor, seemed to be the opposite of Bronson, who was often described as quiet and private. These contrasting personalities made fans wonder if their working relationship was strained because of their differences. The silence only fueled these theories, and the mystery grew more intriguing with each passing year. What had happened between the two? Was there a hidden story that the public hadn't been told? As time went on, James Garner began to reflect on his past and realized that perhaps it was time to clear the air. He had been open about many aspects of his career and personal life, so why had he stayed silent about Charles Bronson for so long? In his later years, Garner started to share more about his experiences in Hollywood, including his thoughts on his relationships with other actors. And when it came to Bronson, he finally decided it was time to speak up. The public, after all, had waited long enough for answers. Garner explained that the truth was much simpler than anyone could have imagined. There was no dramatic falling out, no deep conflict between them. They just weren't close friends, and that was okay. What made this revelation so interesting was the fact that it came after so many years of silence. For decades, fans and reporters had tried to get some insight into the relationship between these two Hollywood stars, but Garner had always kept his thoughts to himself. Now, as he looked back on his career, he realized that the mystery was something he didn't need to keep alive any longer. The reality was that while they had worked together on some of the biggest films of their time, there had never been a deep personal connection between him and Bronson. There was no story of a falling out or a hidden rivalry, just two actors who had mutual respect for each other, but nothing more. James Garner's honesty about his relationship with Charles Bronson was a refreshing change for Hollywood. For so long, the public had been led to believe that there was some kind of drama behind the scenes, but in reality, there was no hidden story to uncover. Hollywood often thrives on rumors, gossip, and speculation, but Garner's explanation showed that sometimes the simplest answer is the best one. There was no need for drama or intrigue. Sometimes, people just worked together without becoming close friends. It wasn't a sign of any personal failure or conflict, it was simply how things worked in the fast-paced world of Hollywood. What made this part of the story even more fascinating was the fact that both Garner and Bronson had very different approaches to their careers. Garner was known for his charm, his willingness to connect with people, and his ability to bring warmth and humor to his roles. Bronson, on the other hand, was often seen as a more reserved and serious figure. His roles in films like Death Wish made him a symbol of tough, silent strength, and he wasn't known for being particularly outgoing in real life. It wasn't surprising then that the two men didn't form a close friendship. They were simply different kinds of people, and that difference didn't necessarily create tension, it just made their relationship less personal. Garner's decision to open up about his relationship with Bronson also gave fans a better understanding of how Hollywood worked during their time. The film industry is known for its tight schedules, long hours, and constant pressure to perform. Actors often spend months working together, but once a film is over, they move on to the next project. Hollywood is a place where relationships can be fleeting, and not every co-star becomes a lifelong friend. For James Garner and Charles Bronson, their time working together was just that, time spent doing a job. There was no need for anything more. As Garner spoke more about the situation, he explained that his relationship with Bronson had never been about avoiding each other, it was simply a matter of their lives, not intersecting in a way that would lead to a close friendship. They respected each other's work, but they didn't feel the need to spend time together outside of their professional commitments. And in Hollywood, that was perfectly normal. Not every actor needs to be friends with their co-stars. Sometimes, it's enough to simply have a professional connection, and that was the case with Garner and Bronson. The public reaction to James Garner's comments was mixed. Some fans were disappointed that there wasn't more to the story. They had hoped for a deeper connection, a hidden history that would explain the silence between the two men. But for many, Garner's openness was a breath of fresh air. It was a reminder that not every Hollywood relationship needs to be filled with drama. Sometimes, two people simply do their jobs, share a few laughs on set, and then go their separate ways. And that's okay. James Garner's honesty about his relationship with Charles Bronson finally put an end to the rumors and speculation that had surrounded the two men for so long. There was no grand story to be told, just a simple truth about two men who worked together, respected each other, but never formed a deep personal connection. And in the end, that was the story that needed to be told. Hollywood is a world of mystery, intrigue, and drama, but sometimes, the simplest explanations are the ones that make the most sense.